Well, my friends, this week has been a real mixed bag, I've got to say. We started with so much exciting new insights and footage to pull apart and dive right into, but then, ouch, this pad rocket explosion, which looks to have potentially been the most powerful of all time, shook the entire industry. It once again reminds us that creating game-changing rockets is a lot more challenging than many of us would like to think. Yes, obviously we have a lot to cover today, so let's get started.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and leading with this unfortunate news from the Cape on Thursday, this has been a true disaster. If you haven't seen all the terrifying videos already, stop by Spaceflight Now and NSF, because this was really something. Blue Origin had their newly constructed first and second stage of New Glenn being tested at Launch Complex 39A. They were really close to their next flight, which, as we found out just a little earlier, would be for Amazon LEO satellites. The new booster named No It's Necessary was being prepared for that very flight. You can see it being lifted onto the transporter erector, and soon it was integrated with the second stage. For this test, the payload was not yet on board, so the LEO satellites are currently safe. The fully integrated rocket was prepared on Thursday for its hot fire test, and it looked like the first attempt was aborted that evening. I say that because we could see the water deluge system in action without the following engine ignition here. After some waiting for the next attempt though, these were the horrific views that greeted us from NSF's cameras thanks to Jerry Pike, and I've synced the audio of the explosion because obviously there was quite the delay before the sound hits the camera. Gosh, that looked almost beyond belief given the successes that we've been seeing with the first stages lately. Fortunately, Blue Origin was quick to let us know that no one had been injured and all personnel were safe. The pad though, which is the only pad that they have for New Glenn launches, not even close, as we can clearly see thanks to Greg Scott flying above for us here the following day. Just look at all of the infrastructure scattered around the area. Rewinding here, something at the aft end of the booster seems to have triggered this explosion. There is plenty of speculation out there that a BE-4 engine might have failed and led to the entire cascade of issues. This footage from Spaceflight Now is one of the best views of the accident, so do give them a follow if you're not already. You can see once that upper stage starts to fall, that turns an already awful event into something catastrophic for Blue Origin. Check out this detonation shockwave whip out of screen. Sadly, there is no official word yet detailing the breakdown of the event. Given the widespread damage, they may even need to inspect the entire current engine inventory, and it's possible that the booster Never Tell Me the Odds is also damaged. Blue Origin has already delivered a number of BE-4 engines to United Launch Alliance, so perhaps Vulcan's first stage will be able to kick along on schedule, but it is all just wild speculation right now. I mean, just look at this. There was debris flying miles from the launch pad, which included the various pressure vessels, it seems. They've had so much damage to the transporter erector that it is certainly a complete write-off. One of the lightning towers had fallen, and the other has a sizable dent and snap in the side of it here. I'm wondering at this point if they will try to repair that, or if it's a write-off too. That isn't even touching on the obvious damage at the pad, the deluge systems, and everything involved right at ground zero. One thing I will say is that the Space Force would have certainly got a lot of great data on this explosion, so for the first time we may have solid information coming on how an energetic explosion like this evolves when using largely methane and oxygen. The pad was burning for hours after this event. There is plenty of chatter out there stating that this may be the largest ground-based rocket explosion in history, but the jury is still out until we have the data to back that up. If not, it is certainly the largest pad rocket explosion since the Soviet N-1 blew up right after liftoff in 1969. Anyway, with the monster repair work to come, many of us are thinking that Blue Origin may decide to just prepare for the next, more powerful New Glenn generation in the meantime, so depending on what they choose to do, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we don't see New Glenn fly for at least 12 months. I sure hope I'm wrong about that, but the resulting issues that come with NASA's Artemis plans have just hit a monstrous roadblock because New Glenn held some very key parts of those missions. Not just for the crew landers, of course, but as a delivery vehicle for a whole bunch of future lunar payloads. Okay, so with that terrible news out of the way, lots of fun stuff to dive into as well, so let's change gears. Since Starship Flight 12 almost right on a week ago, SpaceX has released so much more, which has certainly helped give us a much better idea what actually happened during the mission. We've had some staggering photos released by them of the launch, of course, but their video of the liftoff here in beautiful 4K is really incredible. This is obviously in slow motion, but the detail that we can see in the exhaust plume at this speed is really something remarkable. You can see as Starship gets up toward the top of the tower, the hellish fury starts hurling shockwaves all over the field of view that we have. I mean, it almost feels like the shockwaves have shockwaves here. For sure, the SpaceX media team have pulled out all the cards on this mission. As a quick side note though, RGV Aerial Photography also managed to pull off a flight during the launch, which was extremely epic. Now, the thrust of this version 3 Starship, by the way, is quite different to previous versions of Starship, and I took a bunch of time to put together a record of the flight right up to stage separation so that you can really clearly see the difference here between this flight and the previous Flight Test 11. Now, I noticed that there was about 2 seconds difference at the moment that we first see ignition fire, so to really make things fair, we need to account for that. Flight 12 on the right here clearly leaves the pad much faster. Now that means a very clear thrust to weight difference, and obviously the higher the thrust to weight ratio, the faster that it will accelerate away from the pad. Interestingly, it almost seems like SpaceX start holding Flight 12 back at around the 45-second mark. Perhaps because they don't want to push too much dynamic pressure on the vehicle compared to previous flights. If we go right through to max Q, it is faster, but only by a little over 200 kilometers per hour. You may think that the version 3 hasn't really demonstrated that it is a lot more powerful at this point. Well, SpaceX looked to have unleashed the full fury at this moment. By 1 minute and 20 seconds in, you can really see the speed now accelerating faster in comparison. If we look back at this chart second by second, the speed curve is very clear now. Even right at 100 seconds into flight as they lose this outer Raptor engine, that hasn't made any significant change to the curve, so everything may have just ramped up power to immediately compensate for that roughly 3% loss of thrust. The main point that I'm trying to make clear here is that MECO, or most engines cutoff, happens about 15 seconds earlier with Flight 12. Again, this is still counting for that 2-second delay at liftoff, but yet is moving almost exactly 1100 kilometers per hour faster. That is actually quite a huge difference. Now, obviously, chaos erupted here right after the hot staging and that boost back burn. SpaceX released a statement saying that following stage separation, the Super Heavy booster performed a directional flip maneuver and attempted its boost back burn. It was unable to light all planned engines and performed a partial boost back burn that ended early. So yes, this didn't really tell us much that we hadn't clearly seen. They go on to say that Super Heavy attempted to reignite its engines for the landing burn before experiencing a hard splashdown. Again, that's pretty obvious, so SpaceX didn't really tell us much about what happened with the booster. Anyway, I'm going to come right back to this because I've got some thoughts. First though, let's compare the second stage numbers. Now through that initial ascent, I also recorded altitude, but we lose the reading at stage separation. This graph sort of looks a bit deceiving because at hot staging here, Flight 12 looks like it is ahead in the graph. That is just because of how much faster it hits the stage separation point. In actual fact, Flight 12 separates at just under 52 kilometers in altitude. Flight 11, roughly 15 seconds later, is separating just over 58 kilometers in altitude. Now we don't get the altitude readout back again until we get up to about 7 minutes into the flight. At this point, Flight 12 is about 25 kilometers higher, but given that we had lost a vacuum engine about 4 minutes earlier, at this point, Flight 11 is just starting to pass the speed of Flight 12. Flight 11, of course, had the second engine cutoff complete almost bang on the 9-minute mark, but Flight 12, with its missing engine, needed to burn away for another 17 seconds or so to hit the correct speed. Indeed, losing almost 17% of your thrust that early on had a big impact, but even with that, being only 17 seconds late there while having much more significant payload on board is pretty awesome. I can't wait to compare all these numbers to the next mission if we have flawless engine performance right through. Now, the Starship phase of the flight had some new splendour published by SpaceX. Gosh, these look almost to be taken right out of Cyberpunk or something. Looking at these, imagine the near future of these Starship missions flying almost daily to initially place the new Starlink satellites into orbit, or, of course, the other even more advanced constellations planned soon after. It's been quite interesting watching SpaceX's plans with data centers recently. You may have noticed that Anthropic, which makes Claude AI tools among other products, have partnered with SpaceX to substantially increase compute capacity. Speaking of, a big thanks to Outskill sponsoring this video today, and interestingly, they're running what they call a Claudeathon. It's a deep dive into Claude and its many uses, along with over 10 other AI tools, and it's happening this weekend from 10 AM to 7 PM Eastern Time. If you want to learn more about these tools taking the world by storm, they are giving away 1,000 free seats for a limited time, and you get mentored by leaders from Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Nvidia, companies that are at the forefront of this industry. 10 million people around the world have already attended this, and with a 4.9 out of 5 on Trustpilot, it is a highly recommended way to get stuck into understanding this industry. In the workshop, you'll be doing deep research on Claude and building your own artifacts and dashboards. With that, you'll create full presentations using Claude and set up Claude connections such as Indeed to automate your job search. Now, there is loads more crammed into this. With other AI tools packed in, you will learn how to build custom GPTs and agents, generate visuals, and at the end of it, be in a situation to automate your work week. If you sign up now, as a bonus, you get 50 secret Claude codes, an AI prompt library, and a personalized AI toolkit builder. Again, all for free. So if you want to learn and stay ahead, the link is right there in the description, or simply scan the QR code right there to get registered. Thank you, Outskill. Okay, so back to all this amazing new Flight 12 awesomeness shared by SpaceX this week. This shot here is from the Super Heavy watching the Starship fly away with all 6 engines lit up, and that's nice plume interactions between there looking sweet too. This one though is actually my new desktop background at this point. Everything in the Starship skirt is just so beautifully clean now. I absolutely love it, and those exhaust plumes, just magic. With that, we have an external view of the Starship with Earth below there, decorated with all that unique and ever-changing cloud cover. All the upgraded cameras capable of 4K video streaming at every phase of the mission is something that we can't really be grateful enough for. I think the most awesomeness of the Flight 12 action shared by SpaceX through the week though were these new ones of the ship, landing burn, and splashdown. Just look at that flip there. This video they shared on Monday is demonstrating beautifully that the drone cameras being used are the best that we have seen to date. Given that SpaceX were only using the 2 engines for the landing burn this time, the thrust vectoring control that we are seeing here from the Raptors is incredible. Look at them both lance out in different directions to give Starship that needed control. It's bananas. If you look really closely here, you can see that toward the end, the ship starts rotating quickly, almost like a final pirouette. When we were watching this live, we couldn't really see this rotation clearly, and it looked like it was going to just fall onto its belly. From above though, as it switched to that top view, it obviously landed on its back, and that seemed a little weird at the time. With that rotation shown here now, that totally makes sense. Now we got a few stills largely looking to have been sampled from that same point of view, but then check this. From the Starlink account, a totally different angle watching from this direction. All this is obviously video stabilized from the perspective of the horizon, but again, so thrilled that we get to see all this. Now back to that hot staging separation and boost back, we've had fun trying to understand what had gone wrong with the Super Heavy after that event. There's an important factor in understanding this, and we need to fix that first. The telemetry information, such as the engine diagrams and other readouts at the bottom of the screen, are actually well delayed from the live cameras streaming that beautiful footage back. It's a fairly lengthy delay too. Looking at how it was streamed, you can see that those booster engines are lighting back up for the boost back burn, while the video has the booster still directly facing the Starship. That can't be right, of course, and it isn't. Let's just rewind. To fix this issue, I thought we were best to watch the engine telemetry readout on the Starship as they fire up, and then match that to the first sign of fire here at the hot staging event. When we do that, we can clearly see that the camera stream is roughly 5 to 6 seconds behind. That is a big difference, so lining all that up, we've switched out the super heavy engine diagram to what we see from the cameras. Now we can step through that sequence without having those extra variables in mind. So the first thing to note is that this outer engine that shut off soon after max Q stays off for the rest of the flight as far as we can tell from any diagram that we have access to. We can likely ignore that engine from here on out as just a dead engine. As we enter most engines shut off, the center ring of Raptors shuts down, followed by every other outer engine in this neat sequence. So far, so good. As the ship engines fire up, now matching our camera footage very closely, we see it separate and the Super Heavy immediately starts to turn. Unlike before when everything was out of sync, you can now see the 5 engines are lit right through that booster rotation, which was of course expected. Just after all the lit engines on the booster can be seen by the Starship camera, we then watch the boost back ignition sequence. Now it looks like they tried to light up all 8 remaining engines on the center ring, but this one decided not to play ball. Now as a side note, this sits right beside the outer dead engine, which is just an interesting thing I think to point out. You can even see that this matches the booster itself from what we see on cameras. Next, the outer 20 engines attempt to relight using every other engine first, but at this point we now see these middle 3 disappear all at once, and then every engine on that side of the booster rapidly flames out with them. Based on that, I think we can probably assume that something has ruptured internally, immediately starving the engines on that side, I suspect, but nothing official at this stage. There are still 10 engines lit though, 5 from the middle ring and 5 from the outside. The 5 outers shut off, leaving the 5 from the middle ring, and they keep going perhaps until the boost back sequence was supposed to have finished. That may be a short boost back burn, but remember, if all 33 had been used in this sequence, the boost back would have been a lot faster anyway. So if we reverse back a little here, there is also a chance that we may see 1 or 2 small explosions at around the same time the readouts go haywire, but with a full set of Raptors all trying to start at the same time, it may well just be interactions in the exhaust. Some of the engines look like they may perhaps burn for a little longer than the overlay shows, but sensors can probably play a little funny in each frame. Overall though, the telemetry graphic maintains a pretty faithful display of the engines that are ignited or shut down at any point in time. The cascading loss that appeared to flow from the right-hand side Raptors of the diagram is interesting, of course. If we take a look within the version 3 Super Heavy model aft, thanks to the incredible sleuthing work by Chameleon Circuit over time, we don't believe there are any baffles to limit damage from liquid oxygen sloshing around. This was, I suspect, a much more aggressive flip than what SpaceX had expected, and the mass of that oxygen smashing into various lines could cause a bunch of damage internally. When you see a cascade of engines flame out, it feels like that sort of issue. Like many, we are intrigued about why SpaceX wanted to use all 33 engines for boostback. All of that extra thrust would certainly mean that the booster is cancelling out that horizontal velocity much faster, meaning that it is returning at less distance downrange. It would be a small saving for sure, but only if they can pull it off reliably in future. At least if they fired those outer 20 after the booster had completely flipped, that may have helped with any propellant sloshing issues, but yeah, I can't wait to see something official from all of this. So how far may it be until the next flight? Well, right now there isn't a lot to go on. However, Booster 20 should be about done and ready for cryo testing at this point, pending any alterations that SpaceX may want to do now that they have that data from Flight 12. The same goes for Ship 40, by the way. We suspect this already has its 6 Raptor 3 engines installed and is about ready for static fire by now. Until those vehicles roll out though, there is still plenty of other areas receiving lots of attention right now, which are ultimately aimed at increasing that flight frequency. Check out Pad 1 being upgraded to match Pad 2. The trench excavation is well underway now, with the commodities bunker structure being fully assembled just to the side. This looks like a successful attempt to speed up the construction process while groundwork rips along beside. Off to the east, we can see the first patch of rebar and formwork laid out over the new expansion area, and this has now been poured. With that, the crane is now back over beside Pad 1 where they will soon be started with these tower upgrades. Remember, SpaceX needs to install a brand new ship quick disconnect and all of its associated piping that runs down the tower. The new reinforced roof also needs to be installed just as we saw recently at Pad 2, and then of course the bunker and winch system behind the tower needs to be replaced. All those systems are needed for the tower arms to move up and down the tower. Speaking of, the arms will also need their actuators swapped out for the brand new electromechanical ones. There's almost no part of this system that is still the same as it was before. Over here at the tank farm where the crane was previously working to remove all the old methane tanks, they are already digging new concrete piles for extra tanks to be installed. Over the road at the air separation unit, we can now see larger pipes are being installed between all the different sections of heater equipment. These will transfer gases and propellants through the various stages of the process. You can see that the steel bunker around the compressors and motors is still being outfitted with rebar, which we see laying across various levels of the roof. That looks about ready to be poured actually. On the left wing over here, more of those electrical and cooling systems are being installed for when it's eventually time to power the site up. Heading over to the build site, the monstrous gigabay in front is now pushing through the 6th level of steel columns. It's worth noting that the next level 7 will be the last, and this will include all the beams necessary for the roof. This is going to end up with a penthouse sort of setup similar to those at the top of both megabays, although I'm not sure what the purpose of that will be just yet. You can see all that cladding on the lower levels climbing steadily since the last time that we updated you on the gigabay. It is now wrapping all the way around the Star Factory side of the bay, and this will shortly make all 6 of these side doors much more obvious. Over in the Sanchez area, some new orbital launch mount updates here for Pad 1. We have the 4 centerpieces belonging to the middle level on site. Parts for the bottom level have just this week been showing up and are already lifted onto the pedestal, so SpaceX are ready to begin months of welding work. With that, the new hardware for the horizontal booster transport is just over here too. Chrome Kiwi put together this nice animation on how it should come together. It looks to latch onto those hold down points of the booster, and it should allow it to rotate down while the top is lowered onto a support. It is going to be really strange seeing Starship hardware laying down for the first time. To go with that, the Marmac 31 drone ship nicknamed You'll Thank Me Later is heading to Starbase for some sort of transport rehearsal, we assume. We could see it exiting the port in Florida recently, and here it was arriving in Starbase just this week on NSF's cameras. So how are things going in Florida right now, you might ask? Well, just this week, the second tower crane which assisted in the construction of the gigabay here was being disassembled now that it is at its full height. The tall crawler cranes surrounding the bay will install the remaining cladding and outfit the penthouse and roof. Harry Stranger has also recently provided us with some more incredibly detailed satellite shots of all of the Space Coast sites too, and the most notable changeover at 39A are these new barriers positioned at either exit of the Starship flame trench with drains positioned in the middle collecting all the water. That is useful now that they are beginning to get into the qualification and certification part of the pad's construction as it comes to life. We of course had all those sneaky views of the Florida Starship Tower components coming together around Pad 39A, which were brand new to all of us during last week's launch broadcast. Just because we are not allowed to get in close to the area, it's always wonderful to see SpaceX's shared content of the pad coming together in high definition. I do wish we could have more of this sort of thing, so I hope we get to see the media team gearing up for some more of those documentary releases. We can see the ship quick disconnect being installed, and crossing over to the gigabay at the Roberts Road site nearby, that monster construction work shows that although it is a big job just to share the colossal work in Texas, an equal push is going on right here. Now, Space Launch Complex 37, which is SpaceX's largest launch site to date, is getting massive overhauls. Pad 1 over here has had its trench near completely excavated. The tower base has been done for quite some time now, and the crane is laying down here nearby waiting to begin stacking all these tower modules stored toward the lower end of the site. In the meantime, they have already begun to build sections of the roof reinforcements similar to what we see at Pad 2 in Starbase, Texas. We have a few quick Starlink missions sprinkled through the week too, of course. Group 1047 was roaring off the pad on Monday morning from Space Launch Complex 40 with another batch of 29 satellites on board. Falcon 9 booster 1078, a true veteran on its 28th flight, and a shortfall of gravitas was waiting downrange for that touchdown. Group 1737 was away across the country from California on Tuesday morning with the next batch of 24. A fairly cloudy morning there from Vandenberg Space Force Base. Booster 1100 is only on landing number 6 in this one, so just a baby there as it touches down on Of Course I Still Love You. That just left Group 1053 back again from Space Launch Complex 40 on Friday morning. Remember, we only have 2 drone ships for Falcon 9 catches now, so everything from Florida lands on a shortfall of gravitas, so this was back out again since its catch on Monday. Landing 16 there to wrap up the Falcon 9 action with booster 1085. On Tuesday this week, NASA dropped a whole bunch of new information on their moon base plans going forward. NASA has selected both Astrolab and Lunar Outpost to build rovers that would weigh somewhere around 1 ton. These need to be ready for lunar surface delivery in 2028. The budget allocated for both is pretty much the same, $219 million awarded to Astrolab for their CLV-1 rover, and $220 million is going to Lunar Outpost for their Pegasus rover. Although these awards aren't overly surprising, it is a nice extension to their existing contracts, so they are obviously proving that they have the capability to keep moving steadily forward. NASA wants these rovers to have a 200-kilometre range, but they also need to have the capability to either be driven by astronauts on the mission or driven autonomously from Earth-based operators. Now, the communications delay to the moon is really only about 2.5 seconds, so they can largely drive live, I imagine, which would be pretty awesome to watch. Now, NASA also announced that Blue Origin is going to deliver both these rovers to the moon on separate missions with the evolving Mark 1 lander. For both delivery contracts, they have been awarded just over $280 million. It seems pretty bittersweet reporting on that point right now, though, because who knows how long it may be for New Glenn to be flight capable again after this catastrophe. It wouldn't surprise me at all if NASA needs to now retract this offering and make a new plan. Your guess is as good as mine on that right now, but hopefully we'll have some clarity on that soon. So yes, those were the main announcements, but they also talked a little bit more about the Moonfall plan. What they said here is that they want to use those drones to essentially set up a moon base perimeter. The primary mission for these drones is to search for water ice in the constantly dark areas, along with picking up any other useful data. Once these are about out of propellant though, NASA wants them to then land at each corner of the moon base perimeter. Within that area, they can then map out the future objectives and plan where the actual moon base hab would be installed. Even though at this point the drones would be retired, just having them equipped with beacons and reflectors would be very useful for future missions. So with that, my friends, we reach the end of all that exciting stuff this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, that subscribe button right there doesn't press itself. If, by the way, you haven't had a chance to check out this video, that is right here. Thanks as always for watching all this way through. I'll catch you next weekend.